He's gonna call 2 or 3 people that have an attorney here. I'm not quite sure if they want to do it. Commonwealth versus Charles Bookman.
It's the defense counsel.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you are. Thomas Bailey.
Judge Charles Bookman for Mr. Bailey.
Counsel, we'll move right along with the co-defendants, but thank you. We have your appearances to say?
Yes.
We will. Thank you.
You already got it.
Thank you.
And Commonwealth versus Eric Falzon and Clay Gollobin.
Good morning, Your Honor. John Coffey. I've been for my appearance for Mr. Gollobin.
Mr. Falzon, which one is you? I know that you've told the lawyer we sent down to talk to you that you expected Mr. Kennedy to help you. We've been waiting for him. They've been waiting for hours for him. I would keep waiting if I thought he was about to come through the door. But I'm going to see what I can accomplish with the other people. We'll hold on for you until he gets here, assuming he's still coming, and take it from there.
Mr. Bailey, you're charged with conspiracy to violate the drug law, possession to distribute Class D, trafficking in marijuana, and a second count of possession to distribute Class D. Mr. Falzon, you're charged with possession to distribute Class D, conspiracy to violate drug law, and trafficking in marijuana. And Mr. Gollobin, you're charged with possession to distribute Class D, conspiracy to violate the drug law, and trafficking in marijuana. All of these are in Waltham on October 19, 2001.
Mr. Livingstone?
Yes, Your Honor. We asked for a $2 million cash bail for each of the 3 defendants.
And I'll hear you.
Thank you. This case results from a search warrant that was executed last night in Waltham. The defendants were found in a warehouse on Lexington Street. The police had the warehouse under surveillance starting earlier in the day. They saw somebody come to the warehouse.
I'm confused. An empty warehouse and a warehouse that is a business?
It appeared from the outside that it was an empty warehouse. It had the look of an empty warehouse.
I can't hear you.
It had the look of an empty warehouse.
Okay.
And they did a motor vehicle stop of the person that left the warehouse. That individual had a sizable amount of marijuana that he said he purchased from Mr. Bailey for $800 at the warehouse immediately before the stop.
This is some third party.
Yes.
Okay.
Based on that information, the police went to the warehouse. They entered the warehouse, and in plain sight, they found 700, a large number of plants of marijuana. They then got a search warrant, went back. What they ultimately seized was 700 plants of marijuana plants. The police report describes it as additionally hundreds of pounds of loose-cut marijuana, along with other indicia of growing or selling. Plastic bags packaged for sale, 40-gallon buckets, smaller and larger plastic containers, as well as large quantities of marijuana hanging and laid about at various stages of drying. There was $20,000 in U.S. currency that was seized in the warehouse. All 3 defendants were in the warehouse at the time the police first entered. In addition to that, what I learned this morning from the investigative officer, Detective Connors, was the warehouse itself was purchased by Mr. Bailey this past July for $460,000 cash. From what I understand, the defendants have significant assets. With the charges as of issued right now, it's trafficking in marijuana over 50 pounds. That has if it's indicted in that way, that has a mandatory minimum of a year in prison. Based on the police report that there was hundreds of pounds of marijuana that was found in addition to the growing marijuana, it seems likely that it would be trafficking between over 100, less than 2,000. That is a 3-year mandatory minimum. Also, I understand because of the law.
I can tell you it's not very helpful for you to tell me generally they have a lot of assets. I understand the point about paying cash for a warehouse, but what is your reference when you say they have a lot of assets?
In my
One of them purports to be a teacher's aide in Boston for the last 10 years, for example.
my information, again from Detective Connors, is that Mr. Bailey lives in a house that he says is worth over $1 million. I don't know the assets of the other individuals. Mr. Bailey was the one that purchased the warehouse, again, with $460,000 in cash.
And we're only talking about him and Mr. Gollobin right now, but I take it your theme connecting Mr. Bailey to the events is the ownership and presence. What about Mr. Gollobin?
Mr. Gollobin was also present in the warehouse at the time the police entered it. And so we think the $2 million is appropriate in this case based on the significant crime that was being committed here, the significant assets of the defendant, the fact that none of them have served jail time and they're now facing mandatory minimums for the first time. We think that makes them a significant flight risk, and we think $2 million is an appropriate bail.
Thank you. Mr. Bookman?
Judge, as you might imagine, I couldn't disagree more with my colleague as far as the amount, and actually for some of the same...
Oh, for the bail.
For the bail.
Go ahead.
The bail. For some of the same reasons that he articulated. Even if you took everything that the Commonwealth said is true at this point, my client is facing a 1-year mandatory minimum. He doesn't have a record. So let's say the 1-year mandatory minimum is a bad fact for bail. He doesn't have any kind of a criminal record whatsoever. An absolute clean sheet. He was born in Norwood, graduated from Sharon High School, graduated from Northeastern University, has a wife, 4 children, ages 18, 16, 12, and 8. Actually, he has another child, an infant, 5 children. He's been very active in the community, the communities that he's lived in, Sharon and Watertown and Waltham. He served in the Navy. He has 5 siblings in the New England area. Everything about this gentleman is, as far as his location, is around here. So the only fact that would perhaps lend one to think that he would flee the area is that he doesn't have a record and is for the first time ever facing jail time. He is charged with something that has a 1-year minimum mandatory. That's it. That is not the type of charge that requires a $2 million bail to keep someone in the community and to assure their presence.